We just wanted to take a second to remind you that while we're okay swearing when little ears are listening, you might not be, and that's okay. So here's your chance to pause us and wait for nap time, or pop in your earbuds. We hope you enjoy the episode.
2, 3, 4, put me in the slammer, put me in the straight jacket. 'Cause I'm a criminal, I need some medication. I'm hearing voices, I'm making bad choices.
That last episode was some heavy shit, and I had an emotional hangover afterwards.
Did you? Okay, we haven't even talked about this yet. So we're referencing the last episode, which was grief.
Just grief in general.
I had a full nervous breakdown and luckily had therapy the next day. And we can do an additional episode if we want to talk about my full nervous breakdown and my
I would love to.
And everything my therapist told me, because I literally had like a full revelation about all of the world during our hour together. So luckily I had therapy the next day because I was still in a full tailspin after the episode. But you and I discussed that we wanted to elaborate on the friendship and spouse portion of grief.
And we want to keep this a little light and help you, whether you're in the grief situation or as the griever or the person supporting. And we both came up with our list of what helped us as well as what would help, what we wish people would have done.
Yes.
And I'm not going to lie, this was not, some of it was easy. I had some really great friends, but it was also hard because I feel like when I have a friend who is grieving now on the opposite end, I still, if you know me, you know I'm a runner. So I run away from the situation and I try and be supportive, and all these little tips and tricks that I remember, I just kind of blank out on. And so I think this episode is useful. And if you're a person who has gone through a traumatic experience, a lot of times supporting people who are going through that can be very difficult because it brings up emotions for you. And so this can just be like a little list, and we can even compile it kind of in the show notes or on our Instagram and just give a few tips. And if you guys want to chime in on that post on Instagram, find us on Instagram.
I also think that this is important in terms of a lot of mine, and I don't know what because Jenna and I usually compare lists. We didn't this time, but a lot of mine are peripheral people to the peripheral. I'm saying that correctly. I have Invisalign, so it's not my fucking fault. But mine are a lot of people that were very unlikely support people. And
that's the best.
Like, oh my God, it was crazy. A lot of the people that I thought in my grief were going to be my biggest supports vanished. And these like silent, wonderful people came in out of nowhere. And I will forever, ever, ever associate the trauma I went through with the good in these people that didn't have to do a thing for me. They could have just been like, oh, Janelle's dad's dead. Like, we'll see her when she gets back from Minnesota. And then instead they went out of their comfort zone, texted me in a time that felt tumultuous, and asked real life things they could do to help me.
Isn't that so beautiful? Like, that is
oh my God.
Oh, I love that. And I'm not
beautiful.
gonna lie, like sometimes the people that you're the closest with that you think would be there the most aren't. And so that's something to also consider. And a lot of times people are just scared of this. Either they've gone through it and so they're running like me, or they've never dealt with it and they don't know how to deal with it. So let's get into it. You want to start us off?
I sure do. Okay. My number one thing, and you'll read this across all grief platforms in terms of social media, books, do not say, let me know if I can help.
Yes. What should we say?
What should we say is, I'm coming over at 5. I'm taking your kids. I'm coming over at 7. I'm cleaning your kitchen. I'm coming over at 9 and I'm going to help you address thank you cards. I'm coming over at blah and I'm going to help you do this. If that doesn't sound good to me, say no thank you, no explanation needed.
Exactly.
So do not come at someone in the early or late stages of grief when they're in a bad place and say, let me know if you need anything. Never again say to a person, whether their parent is sick, whether their child is sick, whether they are sick, Never again say, let me know if you need anything. Say nothing at all or say an action you want to
Thank you.
do and
Yes.
give them an out.
Guess
Tell
what?
me your
That
thoughts,
was on
Jenna.
mine. That was
Was
on
that
my
your
list
number
as
one
well.
too?
It stopped saying also, what can I do to help? Because you have to remember, these people are probably overwhelmed with messages. Their thoughts are going. So if your message, say you send a text message and it's, I'm so sorry for the passing of your parent. What can I do to help? You're most likely just going to get a, I'm good, thank you, or a thank you or nothing.
I'll
So
let you
instead,
know.
yes. And they have so much going on and they need so much help already, especially if they are, or they were the caregiver and they're dealing with everything else and they have children, that asking another person for help is so overwhelming. So just say, I'm going to drop by your house and leave a package on your porch. I'm going to schedule house cleaners for this week for you. I'm going to help you write your obituary. What time do you want me to come over? Not your obituary, obviously. Your loved one's
You could
obituary,
write mine. I'd
right?
love it if you wrote mine.
Exactly. That was a big one on my list too. And I had one person do that, and it was an unexpected person. And
Yeah.
she is the sweetest person ever. And that was the first I'd ever heard anything worded like that. And you know me, I haven't read a lot about grief because it's hard for me to. And so when she did that, it was night and day compared to the other messages. That message stuck with me. And we are friends, but she is not one of my best friends. But that just, it was beautiful when she did that. So
The most beautiful thing I will ever remember is my friend Laura, who it was like a 7 out of 10 on my like friend slash acquaintance list. But our kids loved each other. Was like, I'm coming to take your kid. She knew I was writing thank you cards for the gifts. And she said, I'm coming to get your kids. What time works for you? And I was like, she was my neighbor, so she was on foot, so it wasn't like hard. And I was like, oh, no, I'm fine. They're fine. And she was like, no, I'm coming to get your kids. What time works? And I got to just sit and write thank you cards and cry my eyes out without worrying my kids were going to walk in, without worrying that I was like, I just really got to be alone by myself for the first time since my dad died. And it was one of the biggest blessings anyone ever gave me. And she was a person that easily was not that close to me and could have just been like, let me know if you need anything.
Yeah.
And she instead went out of her comfort zone and said, like, basically, I'm abducting your children and I will forever be thankful for that.
Yes. And I did have a lot of people offer to watch my kids. I took up one of my best friends because I had a midwife appointment and she watched my son. But besides that, it was just, I just wasn't comfortable saying, okay, or I didn't think about it. And so, yeah, I think that's a great example, and make it a now action, not I'm going to watch your kids, period. When do you want me to? Like, if you're coming over to help with something, ask like, is it a good time today? You know, that kind of stuff. But make it a now action. I love that.
Oh my God, it was a lifesaver.
And I want to kind of piggyback off of that with one of mine. Remember that the person who's grieving might not want to see people. And so if you are setting up a meal train, offer to also put out a cooler so that they don't have to interact with people and they don't have to worry about being home. So meal trains are great options if people are open to it. And again, don't ask, just say, I'm setting up a meal train. Do you have food allergies? Set it up for them. I'm setting out a cooler outside so you don't have to interact with the people. And whoever is dropping off just drops it off on inside the cooler and done. That was a big thing that one of my friends did for me. And I thought that was so great because I was already overwhelmed with all the phone calls and interacting, and I just needed some time. As well as I
completely agree.
I was spending so much time at my mom's house cleaning it out that the thought of having to be home was overwhelming. Majority of the time I wasn't home. So put out a cooler for the meal train so they do not have to see people.
Also feel okay declining a meal train. I declined meal train because I, like you said, couldn't face seeing people. And I was in such a weird headspace that I couldn't figure out what I was ever hungry for. I would feel nauseous. Like I was almost like a weird feeling of pregnancy where you feel nauseous about some foods because you're just in such a dark emotional place that sometimes you're like, oh, I can only eat sugar right now. And sometimes you're like, oh, I can only eat meat right now. And so feel okay declining a meal train. But like Jenna said, if you accept a meal train, ask them to let you have an option because there was no way I was seeing anyone. Like I could not not be bothered to see someone for food.
And we set up ours. I had a hard time. I don't know about you, but mornings were really hard. And so I asked for breakfast friendly things like muffins and stuff that I could feed my
That's
kids.
so smart.
Yeah, because I
Yeah, I
was
didn't
the
think of
same way.
that.
I wasn't really eating and I just needed kid friendly foods because I needed my kids fed. I didn't need to worry
Yeah.
about myself. And I was also pregnant. So I was like, I don't even know what I'll eat or if
Yeah,
I'll
I
eat.
just
But
and I said, I appreciate it. We're not in a meal train situation, but anytime anybody wants to drop off coffee, we will take it morning, noon, and night.
Yeah.
So there's other alternatives. Say like, can I set up a coffee train for you? Or can I set up, I'm trying to think, or a comfort item. I had friends that would drop off like blankets and sweatshirt. That's
Aw.
another beautiful option if a meal train isn't a thing, but don't expect to drop it off and get a hug and a thank you.
Right.
Pretend this person has a communicable disease and
Yeah.
you don't want to see them and they don't want to see you and it has nothing to do with you and they maybe do want a hug, but assume they don't.
Exactly. If they do, they'll go to the door.
If they do, they'll show up. Surprise.
And to go with that, I had a few friends who included things for mostly just Ezra, my oldest, because Peyton wasn't born yet. And then when my dad passed, she was itty bitty.
Yep.
So they included things that would distract him that he could do on his own. And I got these gifts also when my mom was passing, and it was so nice. Like he was into Thomas the Train. So one friend got me like a little Thomas the Train track and set. And so I could bring it with me.
Oh, I have that one too. And I love that one.
Yeah. So when I went to go see my mom, he could be downstairs playing and I could go upstairs and do what I needed to do. He could also play it quietly with her. And so if you have the financial means, or if your kids even have toys that they're not playing with that they want to give to a friend, a teddy bear to hug, anything, something to distract the kids. And if you're doing a meal train or whatever, you can set that on their porch as well. Again, I would not say, like, this is not the time for recognition. Like, I'm bringing your kid a gift. I would love to see you. Don't even tell them you're coming. Put it on the porch, send them a little message. Hey, there's something on your porch. And make it something that's somewhat quiet so that the mom can think. And if you want to include something for mom, the good things like I got some teas because I was pregnant, as well as books, but not books about grief. I hate to say that, but books that will distract their mind and take their mind off of it. Or even just like some kind of like little like puzzles, like Sudoku, that kind of stuff. Anything that they can do that's going to keep their mind busy.
Okay, so my next one is we get enough pity, show up with something else. I felt so overwhelmed with the amount of pity. You're a runner and I am naturally avoidant of people pitying me. It makes me like right now, look at my, just thinking about people feeling sorry for me makes me have a physical reaction. And people should feel sorry for people when people die. Yeah, you should. That's a natural inclination. But my biggest memories in the early grief are the people that showed up with something besides pity. So I have a girlfriend, Courtney, and she dropped off a card, I think, and a plant, and in the card, and I will not cry. I wonder if I have it in one of my boxes. I'll have to get it out. But it was a long card, and she was like, based on everything that you've written about your dad, he sounds fucking rad. You know what I'd really love? If you would let me take you to coffee sometime when you're feeling up to it and just tell me stories about your dad.
Oh, that's so cool. That's
so
so cool.
up wanting to hear stories about my dad. And not say, oh, I'm so sorry. Are you doing all right? And I also had friends.
Tell me everything. You don't want to talk about the grief. You want to talk about the good times. I love that.
And she was like, your dad sounds fucking rad. I would love to hear about like some of his cool biker days or like when he was a bouncer. And like she always showed up with the card that said an action that wasn't pity. And I really appreciated that. And I also appreciated friends that would show up and be angry with me. And hold my hand and say, this is so fucking unfair. I had a girlfriend who I'll probably talk about further in here named Sarah. And she was these are all peripheral people to me. These aren't my best friends. These are people that are 7 out of 10 on my friends level at that point. And she would show up and be like, she was a heart surgery, like a nurse for heart surgeries. And she would sit down and be like, this isn't fucking fair. This isn't how this normally goes. Like he should have been okay.
Thank you.
But they're not always okay. And I'm fucking sorry. And he was supposed to be up and walking in 8 hours like you expected. And he wasn't. And it's not fair. Show up angry with me and sit with me in my anger. Don't show up and rub my back and say, oh, sweet baby, is there anything I can say to you to make you feel better? because
Unless you want cuddles, give cuddles. Like,
if
you
you
can read
want
the
cuddles,
person. You
yeah,
can
you can
tell. If
read the
they're starting
person.
to avoid, like,
Mhm.
back off and talk about something else.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
If they are not, if you don't feel them lean into whatever you may need to switch if you go over there thinking that you're going to just show up and wrap them in a warm hug and that's not where their head is that day, it doesn't make it better.
No. And that's my number one on my list is just
Ooh.
talk. Just talk. And if you're like, I just don't want to bother them, don't. Just send a text message and just be like, hey, thinking of you. Hey,
Yeah.
my kid did XYZ. Hey, does your kid want to FaceTime mine? Just talk. It does not have to be about grief. If you say you don't know what to say, then don't say anything about grief. Of course, address it, because I did have some people that never addressed like your parents passed, which was fucking awkward.
And then they're just
And
like, have you seen
heavy,
any good sales on
right?
Cheetos lately?
And so they like completely avoided me during that time. And then it's like, okay, now
Yeah.
I'm back. Is everything good? Like, don't do that. Address it. Tell them you're very sorry. Like, if, all those things, just talk to them. But then after that, just talk.
Yeah.
The next day, don't be like, how are you doing? Because we know how you're doing. You're shitty. Like,
super shitty.
yeah. So
Shittiest ever.
right? Or be like, hey, you want to hear a funny story? I know that like you're probably not in the mood to laugh, but I just wanted to share this with you. And
just in case.
just talk to the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like I said, I had some people that just avoided, family even.
Well, and you talked about that with your dad when your mom had cancer when you were young, your dad lost friends because people don't know how to act and they sometimes just are like, I guess I'll back out, and they keep thinking like I'll text her next week, I'll text her next week, I'll text her next week, and then all of a sudden it's been a year and you're not a person anymore in my world.
And if the griever doesn't respond, that doesn't mean they don't want to talk to you. It might just mean that they forgot or they read it, they acknowledge it, they love it. And if you don't know what to say, go on fucking Pinterest or Instagram and just screenshot a little quote that says how important that person is and send it to them. And when my mom had cancer the second time, I was married but without kids, and my aunt would send me an inspirational quote every morning, like something about like, you've got this, you're a fighter, like we're going to get through this together. And those just helped me every day because I was caring for her. And just knowing somebody thinks about you, just fucking talk to them.
And knowing somebody wakes up in the morning and one of their first thoughts is you validates your pain and validates your situation in a way that I don't think people that haven't been through this can understand. Knowing that someone's getting up every morning and gets hit in the stomach like you do really makes you feel less alone.
Exactly. And even just I'm thinking of you.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the last one I have on my list. I don't know how many you have. And it's a don't, which I don't love don'ts. I try to not use those a lot with my kids.
I love don'ts.
But here it is. Do, and this should be number one, but I wanted to save it for the end because it's my favorite / least favorite because of the don't.
I'm so excited.
Do not tell the person everything will be okay or it will get easier. I had so many fucking people tell me when my mom had cancer the second time, I had people tell me they had to do an exploratory surgery to test the cells to see if she had cancer. This was for her first ovarian cancer. And I had so many people be like, it'll be fine. It's going to be benign. Da, 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 da. Guess what? It wasn't. When my mom was super sick the third time, and basically we all knew she was dying, but no one would say it because the doctors wouldn't even say it. I had so many people be like, don't worry, she'll get through this. You can get through this. Well, she died. And then that makes you resent the person. I hate to say it, angry towards the person. And when people say things like, don't worry, it'll be fine. How do you tell somebody, don't worry? That is impossible. Just please do not say that. And after that person dies, do not say it will get easier because guess what? It won't. And when I was a teacher, school shootings, unfortunately, were a thing. And they told us, a psychologist told us, do not tell the children everything will be fine, because if they lose a friend, if they lose a parent, if they get injured, they are going to have trust issues. And so I have always done that with my kids. You do not say everything is going to be fine. You say, like as a teacher, you say, I'm going to try my hardest to protect you. So if you have a friend, tell them this fucking sucks. I am so sorry you are going through this, but do not say everything will be okay. That was my biggest pet peeve. And there were times where I'd be like, no, it's not. And then how awkward is that afterwards? Like,
You're
Like,
really good at
it's gonna be
awkward though. You
okay.
pull it
Oh.
off, so I'm fine with it.
So that is my
Do
number
not
one.
say everything will be okay, and you're completely right.
It'll get
But
easier.
that's a human reflex, especially in Western culture, is
Mm,
to like stomp down. I forgot to bring my book with my sweet quote in it today, but it was
yeah.
based, I'll read it later. But telling someone everything will be okay is negating their need to be heard and seen and validated.
Mhm.
You are not validating someone by telling them everything will be okay any more than you are when your kid's crying to say, knock off that crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Like you're
Yeah.
not saving anyone, you're not fixing anyone. If that is what comes to your lips,
Yeah.
swallow it back down and then
Mhm.
stomp it out and then think of anything else to say. Say, have you
Anything.
heard that Adele's coming out with a new album? I don't know if that's not true, but I'm just saying, like, think of
Yeah.
anything to say is
Did you
better than
see the
saying,
neighbor streaking down the street the other day?
yes,
Like, just
anything,
yeah,
anything.
do
Okay, so
it.
I have leading in, um, I had two friends. So I barely knew this girl, Sarah, from the gym. And I'm sure everyone in my family is always like, oh, Sarah from the gym. So she's she was the cardiac nurse and
Mhm.
she barely fucking knew me and heard through the gym because I went to a gym that was really close knit and I had a lot of friends there at the time. And she heard what had happened to my dad and got my phone number from like the front desk. Like, I don't even think we had each other's phone
Aw.
numbers and called me and was like, listen, I was a cardiac nurse in the ER or in the operating room. I've done all of these procedures. Can you call me anytime you have a question?
Oh, that's
And
awesome,
she barely fucking knew me. She could have easily been like, I got three
right?
kids. I'm good. I got two
Yeah.
jobs. Like, I'm fine. And I would call her all hours of the night and be like,
Aw.
okay, he needs an ECMO. What does that mean? He has the stent in his neck and it's not in his leg. What does that mean? And I would take pictures of all the medications he was on and be like, what is this right? 2 in the morning, I'd be in the bathroom crying at the hospital and she would answer. I would lay on the
Aw.
floor in the bathroom at the
Pre-COVID.
hospital. Jenna, I just want you to sit with that for a minute. Me
Uh-huh.
laying on the floor of a hospital bathroom crying to this person I barely know, Sarah, who knows the answers to all my questions.
Aw.
And she could have easily just looked the other way. And that's my
Yeah.
other part of this lean in story. The trainer at my gym texted me as we were driving from Virginia to Minneapolis and said, some of the girls want to get some money together to send flowers to the funeral. I, knowing you, feel like I know your dad, and your dad wouldn't want flowers. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, how many like ballsy steps did that take
Right.
to assume you knew about a person because you assume what I like? And I
Mhm.
was like, my dad and I hate flowers.
Yeah.
Thank you for sending me this message. And they donated to St. Jude's Children's Hospital like over
Mhm.
$1,000 as a community,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
my dad loved kids more than anything. So we were able to donate a
Yeah.
ton of money to St. Jude's instead of having a bunch of flowers, which me and my
How
dad always
cool.
said, like, flowers are not really our thing. Like, they're
Yeah.
just something you pick and dye and they're expensive. Those are two people that went out on a limb and could have easily have been like, oh, this
Mhm.
is could be a potentially awkward situation, but I'm going to do it because as awkward as I could potentially feel is not as terrible as Janelle feels right now. So, like,
Mhm.
let's do what we can to support Janelle, even if it feels uncomfortable.
Oh, I love that. That's
I
cool.
loved it. Those are two of the most outstanding things that I will always remember about this experience is
Yeah.
those two people. And you also said about the friends that lean away from you. I had one friend that so my dad died in August. I was a mess through Christmas. I texted this friend in like February after Christmas and was like, hey, how are things going? I haven't heard from you in a while. And she was like, literally wrote back. I wish I could find it on my phone. Literally wrote back, oh, I assumed you were like dead or something because I texted you on Christmas and you never wrote back.
Mhm.
And I wrote back, oh, I'm sorry that I forgot to write you back. You may remember that she was there I was with her the day my dad died.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
said, I spent Christmas crying in a chair. I
Mhm.
remember none of it. My husband bought and wrapped all the presents. So I'm sorry if I didn't respond to you that day, but I wasn't being a good friend to anyone. And she just wrote back like, ha ha ha. And I never fucking spoke to her again.
Good for you. Good
Like,
for you. Yeah.
how self-centered are you that I didn't respond to your like generic Christmas text the first
Mhm.
Christmas after my dad is dead,
Yeah.
and you're gonna hold that against me? Like,
Yeah. Even if your dad didn't pass, like, that's just not being a good friend. I'm sorry.
even
Like,
if you, yeah, even if my dad was like, I'm sorry that
no.
Christmas, you don't know what holidays are hard. Like, I
Yeah.
don't owe you a Merry Christmas generic ass text.
No.
And Christmas was so blacked out to me that I didn't
Right?
even know she had texted me. And I
Yeah.
wrote, I said, I don't have any record of you texting me, but if you did, I apologize because I had gotten a new phone since then.
Mhm.
And I was like, just so you know, this is what my Christmas looked like. And I'm sorry that you didn't fit into the hierarchy of needs at that point. And
Right.
she just wrote back like, ha ha ha. And I was like, and you're done for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And this wasn't on my list, but it reminded me. As a friend, remember your friend who's grieving? It's not a cut and dry kind of thing. They will have stages that they go through years later that are
Yeah.
unexpected and that
Yeah.
are dark and that are hard. I had one during COVID, and I lost a friend during it because she could not support me and she couldn't understand where I was coming from. And I tried and tried, and then I got not the nicest message from her. And so I just decided that that's not what I need in my life right now. And when you reach out and tell somebody that you're having a hard time over grief, that is very vulnerable. That is very difficult. That is very hard. And as a friend, take that as like a precious gift. Like my friend told me, she like, because it's so easy to just pretend like we're fine.
Yeah.
And if you reach out to somebody and tell them that you're having a hard time, good job. And if you're the person that hears that from somebody, like, be like, oh my gosh, they are giving me this gift that they trust me with this grief,
Yes.
that they trust me with this heaviness years later. I mean,
Yes.
like I said, I'm 2 and 3 years out and I still struggle. And there'll be times where I'm great and then times where I'm not. And I have those friends that I tell, hey, going through a hard time. And it's not usually a day or a moment, it's weeks, sometimes months.
Yeah, yeah, and
So be
I've
that
had the same
person.
experience, and if someone like I think of it as like there's been 100 times where someone will be like, "Hey, how are you doing? We haven't talked in a while," and I'll start to text like, "Fine, how are you?" And then I
Hmm.
go back and I'm like, "I really trust this person," and I delete it, and I'm like, "You know what? I've had a hard week with, the grief from my dad still." And
Yep.
they're like, "Oh, okay, well, let's talk about that." That is so
Hmm.
precious, and I'm trusting you with a part of me that is vulnerable. And
Hmm.
if you can like come and meet me in that place, like you're right,
Yeah.
die, like we're good to go.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And like everything, which I didn't expect, everything new is hard for a person who's experienced grief.
Yes.
So COVID brought up all new
Hmm.
everything, feelings and thoughts and grief and everything. Having a new baby, of course, as you can imagine. Even moving homes. When I moved, you would think it would be a happy and glorious time. And I know that you and I have talked about how we both experienced this when you moved out of your house too. But that house is where I had the memories with my parents,
Yep.
and leaving that behind. And then this is going to sound crazy, but I was also like, if they ever come back, they can't find me. And I was so
I loved
paranoid.
when you
But
said that because I had never thought of that.
I mean, I know they're not coming back, but I was like, if they do, like, should I leave a note on the door?
I guarantee when this podcast airs, you will not be the only person that feels that way.
Oh, my brother has said he feels the same way because he's moved to California and he's like, they, they won't know where to find me. But
Well, and
it's just
mine, I'm moving to Chicago, and I'm like, my dad got in his ex, or like everything happened to my dad while I was in Virginia. Like,
right.
eh,
Yeah.
but I couldn't wait to get out of that house that I found out he died in because there was a
Yes.
spot in that house I couldn't walk past without
And that's
feeling
why I moved
something
too. It
coming.
was
Yep.
happy moments, but there was so much heaviness in that house. So,
Yeah, it changes the
yeah.
house. And my final thought is maybe this is the time that the griever wants to learn about Jesus.
Mhm.
Maybe it's not the time the griever wants to talk about Jesus.
Yes.
And so I was all about Jesus. And I've had moments
Mhm.
of going back to Jesus. On my dad's 6-month death anniversary, I sat in church and bawled my eyes out by myself. My husband
Mhm.
was traveling, my kids were in childcare, and I was there that moment. But like my mom was really pushy about like your dad should be buried at the cemetery with this person and this person at the religious part of this, and we should have a priest there because of this. And my dad wasn't into all that stuff. then I had you've had mixed experiences with certain things in the Bible, and I had mixed experiences with some grief support groups that were church based. And just know that saying everything's going to get better is a lot. Also, like, he's in a better place. He's with our Lord and Savior now. Like, not the time.
Yeah.
I think that we can all agree that there's a time and a place for religion, and you and I may have differing, we don't even know each other's full religious views, and this is not a religious podcast. Saying he's with our Lord and Savior now when someone is like trying to keep their kids alive and trying to like get out of bed every morning doesn't
He's in a better place.
necessarily
He's
fix
not in
it.
pain. Yeah.
He's in a better place. He's not in pain. And I'm like, yeah, well, your mom's here. So cool. Thanks for the advice.
And
or
guess what? My mom would have taken all that pain if she could have just been with her grandbabies.
Not even a question. Yep. My dad would have done anything. Like, your griever may or may not come back to Jesus, or may stick with Jesus harder than ever, or may turn away from Jesus, but it is not your job to save their soul in their grief. Let them come there in their own time frame.
Yes.
And just be there to walk with them without being like, can we pray together? I had people who would literally be like, can I come over to your house and pray over you? And in the beginning, and I was like, no.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good for you for saying no. So yeah, I hope this is helpful. I'm going to try and I'm going to compile all the tips and kind of compact them, because I think that this needs to be out there to be accessible, even for myself.
Yeah, and Jenna loves a good spreadsheet. So send us all of your suggestions for things that did help you. So you can even just write into we have an email, doneplayingbytherules@gmail. Send in "this helped" as your subject line and write what helped, and then send "this doesn't help" as your subject line and write that list. And once you say it and someone else agrees with it, you're going to be surprised how much less painful it feels.
Exactly. So, as always, call your therapist
and take your meds.